Boom! Ed, how are you?
Hello, David. How are
It's
you?
after taking a while to get the two of us in here at the one time.
It's taken a while, yeah. I've been sort of hanging around outside the front door.
How was your Christmas?
Pretty good, yeah. Relaxing. Too much beer.
You're looking very fresh now for a lad that says you're after getting too much beer.
I was in the gym just before I came out, so yeah. So
Home gym or in the gym?
home gym, yeah.
That's the only way to do it.
Yeah.
That's the only way to do it. Push this right in. Pretend that it's a penis.
I can't usually get it this close to my face. I'd have to throw it over my shoulder, Dave.
If you're wondering why I'm looking so fresh here,
Yeah.
so I went home and my beard was looking a bit unkempt, and I have a little razor, and Clark or someone must have took the plastic thing off it for, the dictating how long it is, and I just had one line gone down it, and then I just said, oh, I may keep going, and then I looked like a rabid dog.
Well, that's the only time I ever look fresh like that is when I actually slip with the razor or do something wrong and I have to shave the rest of it off.
It's horrible. Yeah. And after I shaved, I came out with this rash and never shaving again, ever.
You need to start getting your sort of male grooming
Do you
products together.
Do you shave clean?
Oh, not so much anymore. No, I don't.
Did you ever have to? With work?
I did, yeah, all the time. Yeah, years ago, yeah. But
choice or had to?
No, I never had to. I was never one of these guys who got up out of bed in the morning, went to school, and by 2:00 in the day they had like a full beard. No, that wasn't me. No, genetically we're not that hairy in my family for some reason.
You're hairier than him.
A little bit hairier than him. Yeah.
I only found out tonight that he's what's it called?
Alopecia.
Alopecia, but not on his balls.
Yeah, not on his balls. So I managed to keep the hair on my head successfully so far, but I don't know how long that's going to last. You know?
Well, Ed, I suppose, by any metric, you're a successful man, right? And I like to do podcasts and I like to chat to people on their journey to where they get to. And success can be determined in loads of different ways. But where are you from originally?
I am born and reared in Tala originally. So I was from place Belgard Heights in Tala.
What's that like?
Fairly average. Like it was a housing estate of around 300 houses just on the outskirts of Tala. It was funny growing up because people, when you're in Belgard where I lived, people used to think that was the posh part of the whole Tala. So everybody used to think, oh, they're the posh people living there. But then when you told anyone else that you were living in Tala, you were just living in Tala. They didn't give a shit. They thought it was all rough. It's actually funny today because yesterday I was down in the area. I was down in Ballymount with my sons. They wanted to go and buy airsoft guns or something. There was an airsoft shop, and we were nearby Tala. They saw a signpost for Tala, and they went, "Oh, that's Tala." And I said, "Well, do you want to go up and have a look?" And he says, "Yeah, I want to go see all the burnt out cars and all the horses on fire and stuff." And I said, "Well, okay, I'll bring you up. There's no horses on fire. There's no burnt out cars."
Jeez, if you've seen a horse on fire, that'd be dramatic.
So I brought them up to my old house where I used to live and pointed it out to them and everything. And I couldn't get over. I was driving actually up to the street where we were, and I said, "Jesus, someone's after building in that field." And that was right beside the house, but I just didn't realize that the field where I grew up was just really, really small. And when I was a kid, it just looked enormous.
Yeah.
But back lived there for 16 years. Yeah, born and reared.
And how many in your family?
I've a brother and a sister, and mom. My father passed away a long time ago now when I was 18.
What did your parents do for a living?
My dad was he eventually settled on security alarms and access control and gates and things. He had a company that he set up. Probably, I think I was maybe around 6 or 7 when he started that. But for years before, he did a range of loads of different things. He was in the army. He was a radio operator in the army. He was my mum used to say that he had all sorts of jobs like mixing paint, fiberglass manufacturing, different things. Eventually set up his own business, and my mum worked at home, worked with him doing that. She was did all the bookkeeping and finance for him. And growing up, like he did alarm systems for garages, for access control, gates, security systems, all that sort of stuff. So we always used to be dragged out when we were kids to work, crawling through the forecourt. Yeah, we used to work. He used to laugh at us because we used to get paid a fraction of what the apprentices got paid. You got paid like £20 a week, whatever. The apprentices would be getting around 45, but we'd be doing the same amount of work or being abused more by the lads. But we were always working as kids.
And were you the youngest?
I was the awkward middle child. No, I had a younger sister. She's 2.5 years exactly between all three.
Spoiled rotten.
Spoiled rotten.
Got away with murder.
Got away with murder, yeah, always, yeah.
And what was school like?
School was fairly normal. Like I had a school. There was a school literally just over our wall, a local community school.
That's not the primary school now, is it?
The primary school, yeah. We went to a primary school literally over the wall, and then secondary school. My dad wanted us to. He was determined for us to go to a private school. Wanted us to go to Terranure, just because he never got that opportunity. He never went to school. He left school when he was around 13. His own father died, and he was the eldest, and he had to go out and work. So he wanted us all to go to a good school.
And did he? Did you?
Yeah, he did. He shipped us off. I think my brother was. He applied to get my brother in, and he was rejected because he was an electrical engineer or something. And then he changed on the application form for the application into school to say that he was a managing director of a security company.
Why, had they notions about who to let in?
And then they didn't. He got in then. Well, yeah. So my brother, myself and my brother, we were shipped off down into Temple Oak. Then we went.
Did you have to stay there? Or come home?
Oh no, it wasn't boarding or anything. No, it was just day school. So we got the bus down from Tala every day, and got the bus down and. Bus home the evening time. We're forced to walk the 2 kilometers up the road. Your mother, particularly, she'd turn up for you sometimes, but not always,
And how do you remember school?
School was kind of primary school was a very happy time with a lot of really, really good friends, and still have some of the same friends. I was actually out with one of them last night, a close friend of mine that I've known since I was around 7. It was funny because the field that I told you about a few minutes ago, it was a very small field, but looked enormous back then. But I remember it was a really, really windy day, and I picked up the lid of a kettle was just lying on the top of the ground.
As it does in a field.
So I picked it up and threw it up into the air, and the wind caught it and flew across the field and clocked some poor unfortunate fella.
That's your friend.
Yeah, clocked some poor unfortunate fella in the head and split his head open.
Jeez.
So so I was mouthing off 2 or 3 years later about how I got away with smashing some kid on the head with a kettle, and it turned out to be this fella Dave.
So he lived not too far from you.
He just lived across the road, yeah. So when we all the kids were living in the same housing estate or close, and we're going to the same school. So we kind of knew everybody, and still to this day, I've probably 4 or 5 of these people that I'm still friends with now.
That's cool.
Yeah, secondary school as well. I made a good few friends. Another guy, I only have friends who are called Dave, by the way. All my best friends are called Dave.
I noticed that. It's a bit weird.
Yeah, I have two best friends called Dave. Yeah, from different. One from secondary school, one from primary school. And
I'm David, by the way, so I don't fall under that criteria. Unfortunately,
I met you later in life, David. Yeah, you're my post school friend. But yeah, so secondary school was grand as well, sort of uneventful, So it was.
And what were you into? What topics? What subjects did you like?
I was a sucker for punishment in secondary school. I did all the science subjects. My brother was into science, so I kind of said, I was into science too. I was really good at maths, so I loved maths. Even I told my wife that recently I think about going back and doing some study in maths. I just thought I was a complete another sicko. So, but I used to really enjoy Sudoku and things like that, and math stuff, and enjoy doing the stuff with the kids actually still. But I did physics, chemistry, biology, applied maths, and then a couple of languages eventually when I was doing
a couple of languages. What languages?
2, German and French. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And can you speak them now?
Not really, other than to go up to randomers when you're in Germany and go, ich habe eine großes Wurst, just for the effect.
Yeah.
You just do, that's about as much. And Ruhe la Bibliothèque. I was actually going to get a tattoo on my arm.
That's a dicey thing, getting a tattoo on your arm, isn't it?
Yeah, but just in some random.
Have you any tattoos?
No, I don't.
None?
No.
How did you get away with no tattoos? Were you ever tempted?
Not till recently. Maybe it's the midlife crisis thing, I don't know. But yeah, I might get one soon. I might get one at some stage, yeah.
So when you were in school, did your mum and dad want you to be certain professions, or were they pushing you towards certain careers?
Not really, no. The only thing, they were very good that way. They just were, they were really good parents, really supportive. Sort of, they struggled in the early days. They didn't have a whole lot of money.
They must have put themselves under a lot of pressure putting you to private school.
They did, yeah. They didn't really have a lot of money then. They only started to make a few. My dad only started to really make it and make a few quid later on when we were teenagers, And but he struggled at the beginning. And my brother, he was a victim of the 80s as well, and that he got let go a good few times. Eventually set up on his own. One of my brother's earliest memories was my dad in the mid 80s being at home all the time, thinking this was brilliant, playing Atari, but he was actually just unemployed at home.
Jeez.
Stay-at-home dad. But they struggled to get us there, but got us through it, I wasn't sorry, what were you asking me again? What was that question?
what were they pushing you into? Like, what did they want you to do? Or?
They never really pushed me into anything. They just wanted us to get good grades and study and work hard and stuff. So, and to get an education, because my dad didn't have one. So he was a very clever guy, and my mum very clever as well, but they never had got that sort of opportunity. My mum had to leave school as well. Her own mother died when she was 8, and she had to move away and move in with aunties. And she was cooking dinners from the time she was 8 or 9. Jeez. For people she didn't have the same opportunity for an education either. So they just wanted us to do something and stay in school and get a college education. And
were you close family?
Yeah, we were a very close family. Yeah, we kind of, like, my dad died when I was around 18, and I always thought to myself how lucky and privileged we were up till then, because we went all over the world. We did lots of different things. My dad was big into traveling. From the time we were like around 4 or 5, used to sort of bail us into the back of a car and drive to France in the summertime. We always had a summer holiday, going somewhere different. So by the time I was like my teens, I'd been all over Europe really for summer holidays in different places, just on a budget, into the ferry and go in the back of a car.
Do you think traveling plants a seed when you're young?
Yeah, I think it broadens your mind, I think, So what they did, they just wanted me to work hard and to do something in school. Like, from the age of around 3, all I wanted to be was a helicopter pilot. I wanted to leave school and become a pilot. And it wasn't one of these sort of fleeting things that I was. It never stopped. I was right the way up till 16 years of age. I was talking about leaving school, getting a cadetship in the Air Corps, and I had a shoe in as well, because my dad had contacts in the army, and it was a shoe in to getting into the Air Corps to fly helicopters.
So when you were in your last couple of years in school, what were you pushing towards yourself?
I didn't really know. Like, I pulled out of the option to go into the Air Corps when I was younger, because I kind of got disillusioned with the way flying was going. I thought I was just going to end up being a glorified bus driver if I did end up going down that route. And then,
why? What way was flying going?
It was just changed, like the way Ryanair was going now, where people are just sort of commuting flying rather than, it was probably more glamorous and exciting and interesting years ago, but then it was like just more sort of hard slog commercial, get up, go somewhere, come back, and don't think I really wanted to do that. In my own head, I sort of was probably watching too much Airwolf and too much that
the
sort of
sexiness was gone over.
Yeah, too much. Yeah, I was watching the A-Team with Mad Murdoch flying around helicopters in the A-Team and thinking that this is the way it was going to be.
Get no plane.
So I didn't really have any specific aspirations to do anything particularly when I was younger, of that age. Like, I was just kind of getting through it, When I was 16, like, my mum and dad moved to Temple Oak, where they built a house when I was around 16, and moved out of Tala. And when I living down there, I started volunteering in. I did one of these President's Awards things. I started to, the Gashka President's Award thing. You had to do sort of. It was a really cool thing. I think my daughter was saying that she might be doing it. I was pushing her towards. But you had to do some work experience. You had to learn a new skill, like learn a musical instrument or something, and then do some voluntary work. So I got a voluntary position working in Cheeverstown, a learning disability service in Dublin, just volunteering at a disco. Basically every Wednesday night there was a social club for people with learning disabilities in Temple Oak, and we went there and hung out and volunteered, and I never left. I stayed there for probably around 5 or 6 years throughout college, and
just loved it.
You just had a great group of friends, and the guys and girls that were there who were availing the service were just lovely people, and we'd friends with some of our friends with learning disabilities. We used to see them regularly. They were just great crack, and I actually got taught. I learned. I was only thinking about this earlier, but I learned to DJ back then. But I learned to DJ. I was taught by a guy with Down syndrome. This guy called Joe, DJ Joe.
And did he DJ there as well?
He DJ'd all the time. He had this all sort of set of groupie girls who used to follow him around and everything, and he was like the king of DJing. He used to be able to mix with tapes.
That's brilliant.
Match with tapes, and he had a little waistcoat and the whole lot, and he was an absolute gentleman. But he ran this disco for 2 hours, and it was the main sort of social scene, and the stuff that used to go on that was just hilarious. Like, that just be that was their night out, and we were there to help and support and to volunteer and to get them going, to clean the place up afterwards and everything. But it was a great social outlet. Like, we made loads of friends, and still to this day loads of friends. But doing that, but that's why I did that for a couple of years, and then because of when I was in school, I actually managed to get a job doing it. Then because of the fact that I was doing it voluntary. I got a job working for the HSE, or sort of a crisis service, working as a one-to-one with
This is before you left school.
Yeah, before I left school all the way through. I always had jobs. Like myself, my brother and my sister, we always had jobs. So we worked from the time we were probably 13, 14. We worked with my dad during the summers, and then we always had a part-time job. So from petrol stations, I worked in petrol stations, worked in Joel's on the main road, washing dishes. But we always had a few quid for a few pints, you know. So we were the only ones with money most of the time because we worked. Like my mum and dad had a strict sort of thing about cutting us off when we were 16. No more money, no more pocket money.
They'd be telling you that.
Oh yeah, you're no more pocket money. You're cut off. That's it. You go get a job.
Figure it out, Ed.
Yeah. Go get a job. Yeah. So you'd be hopping on your bike and cycling down to the Green Hills Road from Tallaght to be there for 6 o'clock in the morning to put petrol in cars or to wash cars, or got a job working on the tills then. So all through school we had some sort of a job. All of us had. My brother was a lounge boy in the Red Cow. He was around 20. He used to get sexually harassed all the time by ones, pinched on the arse by women walking around.
I can imagine that, because my brother has a band and he used to play at the Red Cow, and serious shit used to go on there with old people.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. He was like 17 or so. He was sort of good-looking young fella, but he used to be smacked on the arse all the time walking by. Yeah.
Did he feel that he was being like manhandled, or did he care?
I think he was a bit perturbed by it, given the age of the women at the time. I can't remember him describing it as a very enjoyable experience. Looking back, you know.
Yeah, imagine.
You know, he laughed.
Although there's some sickos have a saying they're the same opening as they are closing.
Yeah.
I don't know about that. And come here. So you're in school. You're leaving cert. You don't really know what you're doing, do you? Or do you have an idea?
No, I kind of had an idea. Like, my brother was into science, and I kind of looked up to him a lot, and I wanted to, and I was thinking to myself, look, I'll go off and do pharmacy or something, because it seemed to be sort of interesting given all the science stuff that I was doing. Like all through, like the voluntary jobs and the sort of working for the side jobs was always there, but I was still looking to get some sort of thing in college. So, but I was like straight A student all the way through. I was getting really top grades all the way through. But I was really lazy. I had really poor attention span.
So you were able to do that without even trying?
Yeah, I had terrible attention span.
Hate people like you.
Yeah, I couldn't focus, and if I lost interest in something, like I'd have to. I couldn't rote learn something off, but if I understood something once, or if I saw it, I'd be able to do it again.
If you had interest in it.
Yeah, I had an interest in it, I'd do it. But if I had no interest in it, you couldn't force me to do it. So my leaving cert was a complete and utter mitigate disaster. I got 560 points in my mocks. And I got around 340 in my leave, and then because I just completely lost interest. I didn't want to do it anymore. And 4 or 5 months beforehand, I just
were your parents raging? They
were kind of a bit pissed off about it, really.
Were you raging yourself?
Not really, no, because I kind of just I just lost total interest in it. I wasn't that bothered about it, and even filling out the CEO form, it was kind of. I had all the things that I wanted to do, and I was so sort of my own arse at that point. I thought that, sure, look, there's no point in messing around with the diploma courses. I'll just fill that out for the crack. So I put all the stuff that I had no interest in doing, and I eventually I got offered forestry management in Carlow. I think that was what.
Thank God you didn't get that.
So I was forced to the option of going to Carlow, moving to a place that I didn't know, and doing that. But then I got offered a second choice in software development. Yeah, so I took that. No interest in that either. Just ended up
doing
it. Yeah, in a course. Yeah.
So what did you do then? Did you actually end up doing software?
Yeah, I did.
Development?
I went software development. Yeah, and but like tragically in the middle of that, like I think I was only in college around 4 months when my dad died, and that had I just lost complete interest.
Was it sudden?
Really sudden, yeah. He died of a heart attack, yeah. One Tuesday afternoon after coming back from training. Bizarrely, we were all there. Myself, my brother, my sister, my mum were all there, and we were all teenagers. Like, my sister was probably 16 at the time. I was 18, and my brother was like 20. But normally we'd all be out, or someone would be out. But he just, I was sitting in the kitchen, or I was sitting in the sitting room. And he'd come back from training, and after, like, typically he'd go off sort of training to pool training. He was a scuba diver, and he'd be pool training twice a week. And he just came in, sort of handed me a chip sandwich after coming in from the pub after 2 pints, and then went out. I heard sort of weird noise outside, and then he was collapsed on the ground.
And you seen it?
Oh yeah, we sure we had to give him CPR. We had to try resuscitate him, and it wasn't successful though. So that sort of affected a lot of that.
That must have been horrific.
It was horrific for all of us, yeah, at the time, yeah. So, and that kind of sort of derailed me a lot. And derailed all of us. Derailed my sister and my brother. Like my brother struggled to cope with it but he was trying to be the
man of the house.
He was trying to be the man of the house, but it was very hard on him, and very hard on my sister as well, because she never really she never had that sort of opportunity to be sort of free and get a job and get out, and she was just a kid really when it happened. But we were all there when it happened, So, I mean, my brother was just on the verge of moving out. I think he moved out around a year or two later, and I was in college. So my college, I had a job at the time. I think in Smith's Toy Store. I had a job in the till there, and that kind of fell apart a bit. But they were brilliant. They were very supportive and helped. But my college just completely fell apart then. I know.
Can you remember all that like it was yesterday? You
can. Yeah, it's like 25 years ago actually. So it's still sort of raw. It's not. It doesn't. It still hurts, but like that time heals all. So yeah. I became very sort of like it sort of changes your sort of flavor and opinion about it. You become very desensitized about old people dying, like you'd kind of, I remember as a kid you'd be really insensitive to, well, like, sure, this person died, they were that age, and this person died and they were 40 or they were young, and so you'd but like to be honest with you, a lot of the, like that sort of experience really affect, like I was only a kid, I was 18, and you develop all of these sort of opinions and behaviors, and
I can't imagine how tough that'd be. Yeah. Like when you're young. Because I only lost my father this year, and I was only saying to Matt before, because I was working flat out since then, and you're only processing it when you relax and you chill out and you're not thinking about it. And I was only thinking, it's because your father is the only man alive that wants you to do better than him, kind of. So you lose that father figure. It's a bit weird. You feel a bit alone after it, but it must be horrible when you're young.
My dad wasn't a very good talker. Like, he wasn't a very good communicator. It's hilarious. There's the Dunnes and the Kennys in my family, and the Kennys are real sort of huggers and kissers and affectionate. And then there was the Dunnes who were like completely sort of not able to do that. So he wasn't very good at sort of telling people how he felt about. You'd hear from your mother, "Oh, your dad's really proud of you. Your dad loves that you're doing this, and he's really excited about you doing this." Like, I used to play piano years ago, and different musical instruments, and my mother would come in and say, "Oh, your dad loves hearing your dad play that. Would you go on?" But he was one of these guys that you sort of spent time with. We didn't really talk a whole lot, but you'd spend time. He had a boat, and we used to spend all the summers out on the boat. He'd do fishing charters and diving and scuba diving when we were kids, and we were sort of abandoned. We were abandoned on the side of the shore while they used to go off with all the scuba diving kids, like wandering the.
Sounds fun.
Well, yeah, it was great fun. They'd go to the pub on a Sunday, and we'd be sort of wandering around with 20 kids. But he had the boat, and like I used to be out with them in the evening times, working in the winters and sanding down and stuff. But you'd just be with them. Yeah, you'd just be hanging around with them. You wouldn't necessarily be talking about anything specifically, and he wasn't really that good at that sort of stuff, but he did care. He was a good dad, so he really did look after us, but probably didn't communicate that well, but that was in his upbringing.
Which one are you? Done? Or?
I'm a bit of everything, actually. I'm a bit of a mix of everything. Yeah. I'd be real sort of like huggy and affectionate with the kids and kissy, and I'd have no problem sort of chatting to them about all sorts of stuff. Like, it's funny, in my house I would have done the talk with a lot of the kids about stuff. Well, just background now, I'm social work. I worked in social care and social work for most of my life now,
so it's natural.
So that sort of stuff would be sort of natural, But I wouldn't shy away from those sort of conversations at all. But you try to just be able to talk and have those conversations and have the kids to be able to come and talk to you about stuff, But you're like, you have to learn. Like my mom and dad, like they did their best, but they did make mistakes as well. They weren't perfect, but nobody is perfect. We all make mistakes when we're rearing children, and we're trying to actually keep the house together. And like me running around this evening trying to power outage, trying to mind.
Yeah. Every day is just putting out fires.
Trying to just run around to get down here because the power went and I had no gas at the same time, just all at the one time, But that's what they were like. They were just trying to make ends meet, trying to work, trying to keep the food on the table and actually build a future for themselves and kids, And they had only literally moved into the new house. They'd only built this new house and were planning all these things. They were going to go away and do things, and then he died. So
that's terrible.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. My mother she's like she's an amazing woman. Like she's the role model for anyone. But she struggled for a couple of years, but then sort of said to herself, and I'm just going to get up and
Get on with
get on with it and live my life. And she's done so many things. Like she went and climbed Base Camp Everest. She swam with great white sharks.
I was not expecting that conversation to go there. That was I thought you were going to say, she goes down to the local community.
No, well, no. She basically in the aftermath of his death, she went and did loads of different things. She went to the Great Wall of China. She did the Andes, and
that's mental.
Went great white shark swimming.
Have you done them things?
No, I haven't. No, but I haven't. I would like to get in with sharks now. I would like to that. Yeah, but that'll be on my list now of things to do. But
well, sharks is not on my list for anything.
Yeah.
Unless to eat them. I wouldn't mind eating some.
I was in one of my earliest childhood memories. Actually, was my dad. I was on a boat in Tenerife. You know when you go out on the whale tours in Tenerife and place in the Canaries, and you see those whale watching tours. So we were on one of these whale watching tours back when I was maybe around 11, and I didn't know that my dad had brought a bag of snorkeling gear with him, and we were on one of these tours, and he literally says, "Right, come on, stick that on. You come over, jump it in the water." So we jumped in with the whales, and my mom didn't tell me that there was one right under the boat because she was afraid I wouldn't get in. But we were literally. My mum has a video of it somewhere. I think I saw it there recently. But the two of us were swimming around with whales.
Whale?
Yeah, and loads of baby whales. We were humpback whales in the middle of, or whatever they were down there.
That's deadly. And you video that?
Yeah, video of it somewhere, an old VHS thing. Yeah.
That's cool.
Well, I was only around 10 or 11, and swimming with whales then. Yeah.
Oh, you've a lot. You're lucky so that you have a lot of really cool memories with your dad and stuff.
They kind of fade out. You have to really sort of think about it though. Like even like. 25 years is a long time, and you get busy with life doing everything, and you have to, like, we were only opening up to all these old photos there a while ago, which you have now, like, we still have them, but you don't have them now. I mean, you have the phone, and you have to scroll back through the years, but there's all these old albums with the 80s hairdos, and my dad, my man with the 80s hairdos and the afros and all.
Had he an afro? Was he a cool dude?
Afro, yeah. It was only came up in conversation that he was in he was a mate of Phil Lynnett's. My auntie said he's hung around with Phil Lynott for a period of time because he was in Crumlin, and Phil Lynott lived around the corner. But he had there's a picture of him with the afro and a fur coat and everything from
that's deadly
70s. Yeah.
So you left school and you were doing the software engineering, and after your father died, you just didn't bother doing it, or did you just give it up?
I was kind of doing it, but I was doing a lot of nixers. Like I was always somebody. Like I always had several jobs. I always had a couple of jobs. I used to burn through money like there's no tomorrow, and used to be an awful man for spending money. So drinking it or spending it or doing things or buying stuff. So I had to be able to make money because I couldn't afford my own lifestyle, and I wasn't getting from anywhere else. So I had to go out and try and make it. So I always had probably around 2 jobs, or even in sort of full-time work, I was always the one who was coming home for an hour and then going back out again for another job and finishing up at 9 o'clock at night.
It's like that Conor McGregor quote. You had an unhealthy obsession with spending money, but you also have an unhealthy obsession with making it.
Yeah. I've no time for him though. Like I've no time for that guy particularly as a guy growing up in Tala now, because I just think he just glamorizes scumbag. Do
you know him?
No, I don't. But I know people who are like him and who sort of aspired to be like him. And if you look out there at the moment with people like someone like Katie Taylor, who's represented their country, who's an absolute icon and a role model for our children and our daughters and our sons to go out and aspire to, and this guy's fucking hoarding at buses and going around glamorizing.
That's what media is like now. The drama sells.
Yeah.
The drama is sexy. People find they want to hate him. The more nastiness there is, that's what people want to look at.
Yeah, but I think he could have done a whole lot more in terms of for you as a role model for young people, particularly in Tala and Crumlin and all. And people are aspiring to, like, there's a massive uptake in, like, I do martial arts, but there's a massive uptake in MMA and sports, and all those young people looking to him for guidance and for as a role model. And he could have behaved himself better in public, But I had an unhealthy obsession with trying to make money and to keep my lifestyle going at the time as a kid. But having a few quid, like we had this. We were me and my friend Dave. We think we were 16, and we were the only 2 lads who had a proper job during the summer. We worked in a place called Move.
Is Kettletop get Dave now?
Yeah,
Right.
Kettletop Dave, yeah. But the two of us got a job in this place called MoveX Packaging Services. It was just down the road from where I lived in Tala. And we stuck labels on packets of bleach for 8 hours a day for 3 months solid, and made around 80, 90, 100 pounds a week at the time. And it was absolute brain deadening stuff. But we were the only kids at 16, 17 who could actually afford to go for a pint back then, or be able to do anything with it. We had a few quid.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I always had work, and when I left school, I was in college. I had a couple of things I was started to do Nixers, doing website design for people. I was building websites for them.
And did you learn that skill in college doing the software?
I used to learn. I just taught myself how to do it. I wasn't really paying attention in college, to be honest, and I was kind of pissing around on the side doing things like that. And it was funny. There was a guy. Looking back, he was probably a bit of a visionary now, but there was a guy that this Indian man had approached some people in the school to say that he wanted to open up an IT company, and he wanted to get some young whiz kids on computers who could do websites and do online stuff. This was back in 2000 or 1999. And I went to meet this fella, and he said he wanted to set up a company, and he had 3 or 4 investors who wanted to open up a website development business. So I said, yeah, happy days, I'll go do that. But first of all, I'm going to Boston traveling. I booked it. I'm going away with the girlfriend at the time. I'm not doing this until I come back. So fecked off to Boston for 3 months and lived there for a while, and had a job lined up as I had a job in a copy and print company over there.
In Boston?
In Boston. Worked for a couple of months. Eventually got some consulting, doing website stuff for this cigar company that I met loads of people from the Boston Red Sox, and everybody used to they'd be coming into the cigar shop, and I'd be in the back doing that for a couple of weeks. But it was mad crack. But came back after the 3 months after doing that, and got a job, or basically leading up
with the Indian
company
guy.
With the Indian fellow. Well, he financed it, and I was the managing director of it at the time when I was around 20, and basically led out a team of around 7 developers to build websites for people. And we got some pretty big contracts in the early stage. It was a crowd at Land Pharmaceuticals, which were the biggest company in Ireland at the time. We got a contract for doing their content management system, back end, managing all of their sort of data. 4-Star Pizza, Black Tie, all these different companies we did their websites for. But there was a .com boom and bust back then, and we basically just went to the wall.
You went bust?
Went bust, yeah. So I was I was a 21-year-old.
And were you getting good money when you were there? I
can't actually remember. I got enough to be able to get a car. I had this really horrible promo car. It was a 2-liter diesel Volkswagen Polo with spots on the side. It was a rocket because it was a 2-liter diesel in a Polo.
Was that your first car?
No. My mother had it was my first car that I didn't get. My mom had a car, this sort of a 3-spoke alloy Volkswagen Polo that she gave. It was her car, but she let all of us drive it. Learned to drive on that, and that was the first car I actually got. Through a company or anything. I didn't own it, but I did that for probably a year until it went bang, went tits up, and I couldn't get a job. I ended up I was an opinionated 21-year-old managing director of a business, and going for interviews, people didn't believe it because you were just
a kid.
You're just a kid. They didn't believe that you were doing this, and I spent 6 months. I couldn't get a job anywhere, and I didn't even
doing interviews like all the time.
Yeah, I was doing interviews, and I didn't sign on because I didn't really believe in it stupidly at the time. Which I probably, looking back, I should have done it, because I paid enough tax in my life now, and you pay enough tax working that you should have been able to do it. But I did this for I was unemployed for around 6 months, and then eventually got a job. And they were saying I was getting a car, and I was getting everything. I was getting a car, I was getting a desk, I was getting a phone. I was in the job around 4 or 5 days, and no car, no phone, no laptop, no nothing. I was just sitting in a wall in the middle of Dublin, looking at a wall, making phone calls out of the golden pages. And your man, cold calling, and I was going like, "Where's these?" And then they brought me into a room. They started attacking me and saying that we don't believe you. We've checked out about you. You're not what you say you are, and you never did any of that. And it was like just nonsense. I had done it, and they just let me go. So I just picked myself up again, went out, got a job.
Were you good?
I wasn't good at that time. I was it was the first time I was ever unemployed for a long period of time, and then like I didn't have a job. I've always had a job, but I didn't have a qualification either at that time either, because I had just sort of flunked out of the IT stuff. I just wasn't able to keep up with it because of what happened. And then I I got another job then from this crowd. It was I remember the name of the company. I remember the name of the guy. It was a guy, Jerry, from this Net Nation IT recruitment guy, and I worked there for 2 weeks. And he pulled me in at the end of 2 weeks, and he says, "This job isn't for you." He said, "You're meant to work for yourself."
How could he tell that?
He just said it to me, and I remember ringing Jade at the time, and I was bawling my eyes out on the steps of Pearse Street, going, "I'm after losing my job again. I don't know what I'm going to do." And looking back, and I didn't really know what I was going to do. I thought that was it. How am I going to get myself sorted at this sort of age?
Yeah.
And basically, a friend of mine had actually rang me up. He said, "Jesus, what are you doing, Ed? Why don't you come back to work?" So he I worked with him for years in the HSE in the part-time stuff years ago. And it was kind of funny because my mum and dad always thought that was sort of a waste of time when you're going to get your act together. You can't be hanging around with people with learning disabilities for years and doing this sort of stuff, because it was hanging around with sort of trainee nurses back when I was around 16 or 17.
You could hang with worse. You could hang with worse.
I always laugh. People ask me, "Oh, why did you go into the learning disability services in the first place?" It was like, well, you used to go down here, you'd be hanging around with all of these sort of trainee nurses and doctors, and they were kind of the caring type. They'd feel sorry for you. If you're single for too long, you go, "Oh, come here, Ed, come on, just Jesus Christ, I don't like you, right? I'm just honestly just care about you and want to see you off." But they it was funny, but there's a guy that I know, and I did all the part-time work, when he says, "Look, sure, you might as well just come back and do this for a while." So I went back doing that. And I ended up just bizarrely, I was really good at it. So even back from the days that when I worked with people in the voluntary service, these people are our friends. We didn't treat them any different, and that was probably the secret to it. Like if somebody came up, you weren't
treating them like a patient.
No,
someone you cared for.
You'd slag them. You cared them. You're a mate. You slag them off. Like, and even that, I see people sometimes the way they treat people who have special needs or physical disability. They treat them as if they need to be treated with cotton gloves and sort of tiptoed around. But the reality is, these people are just normal people like anyone else. They want to be slagged. They want to be.
They crave normal interactions.
Normality. They just want to be treated normal. They want to be told to feck off. They want to be told to shut the fuck up and just get on with it. Like sometimes they don't want to be just treated any different than anybody else. So, and that was my strength with it. And I got working with this team of people who had every other service rejected them. So they either had sort of forensic issues or some sort of a offending behaviour.
What does that mean?
They were either sort of caught up in criminality or sort of nuisance type behaviour, or they'd one guy sort of being sexually inappropriate in public, and guys in their teens, 16, 17, who, like, some of them had very, very difficult backgrounds. So like really difficult backgrounds, no father figures, no real solid home. And they had a learning disability as well, but they didn't quite fit in. They didn't have they had very mild intellectual disabilities, or they had autism or something that wasn't very clear. And when the mainstream disability services wouldn't take them because they didn't have Downs, or they weren't severe enough to require their remit of service. So I ended up setting up this team of people in the north, or in an area of Dublin.
Who did?
There was a social worker at the time who sort of got me in to do this, but I ended up working on a couple of cases that was outside of normal services, where we just worked as one-to-one people with people with severe difficulties. So you'd arrive at their house and you'd just go, "Look, well, what's going on, Dave? What's good? Like, what's happening with you? What do you want to do?" Like, "Oh, I'm unhappy. I have no job. I have no friends. I have no girlfriend." So you'd make a list of all the stuff, and you say, "Well, look, I can't get you a girlfriend, but I can bring you out to a disco. We can we can get you a job. We can sort of work on your education. We do all these sort of things." So that's what we did. We delivered.
So it was just individual tailored service to people that were kind of in limbo.
Yeah. It was like square pegs, round holes sort of stuff, that people were sort of being sort of pushed into services and then completely rejecting it, and then they were falling down, or they were offending or doing something really bad, and then they'd get kicked out, and then they'd be left. And then we started to put together these services for people who fit that sort of profile. And I was doing that for around 2 years. I was working in disability services, and actually I'm missing a year or two. I worked for a mainstream disability service.
And were you qualified to do that this time?
No, but I had been doing it since I was 15. So I had been doing the actual work since I was 15. At that point, I was around 21 or 22. I was doing it for years, and I was just really good at it. And guys,
you loved it?
Yeah, I loved it. And the guys who were deemed as like major problems or some of the most difficult people behaviorally in the country just turned into pussycats when I was with them, because they just weren't being listened to. They weren't being listened talked to normally and being treated respect and mutual respect. And it wasn't always fairy tale. Like, these guys had serious issues, some of them. And
you ever scared?
I've been chased around a few times at the pool cue and stuff, like assaulted and been in all sorts of situations. Yeah, but
hence
that was part of the job.
Martial arts. Like
no, yeah, yeah. No, I never did. I didn't do the martial arts because of that. Now, but it was, it was just people would have bad days and people would do things, and you would get assaulted. That's part of social care. Still to this day, people get assaulted and they go into work. People they can't. It's not every day, but it can happen.
So at 22, you're doing this. You realize I like this job.
Yeah, I like it, and I think I'll go back. So I went back to. It was funny. It was. I went back to college, and I remember it was funny. My missus at the time was kind of. With all the different to and fro. And I remember she said to me later, she said, "Jesus Christ, I wonder will he ever get his act together? He's doing all of these sort of he's doing all of these."
And was Jade
various jobs? Yeah, she was a teacher. Yeah, she was a teacher in Coolock. Yeah.
Thinking, I got a fucking waster.
Yeah, what am I ever getting into myself into here? I got an absolute waster. Yeah, he's just going from job to job and working in this learning disability stuff. When's he gonna get a real job? Because it wasn't really that well paid. The two jobs. I had a job in a disability service when I was 20, but I had the other one, the social thing, the team stuff was in the evening times and weekends. So you'd be coming in from work from working in Ballymun and get home an hour, and you'd be getting straight in the bus into Dublin again to go do another job somewhere else, taking these lads playing snooker or to bowl.
Was that more so to pay the bills?
It was to pay the bills, but yeah, it's to pay the bills and to just I never had if you wanted to go in holidays, and there was never enough to be able to actually pay. We all moved out. We didn't live at home then. I moved out when I was around 22, so we'd rent to pay and we had bills to pay back then. And if you wanted to go away on holidays or do anything, you had to have an extra job because it wasn't enough.
So you're under pressure.
I was under pressure all the time back then. So I got the part-time job eventually became a full-time job because the evening job became a bigger demand. There was a lot more of these young fellas and young girls, mostly young fellas, who had severe difficulties, who needed sort of tailored supports. And he ended up by one of the guys I arrived at. One of the guys was around 6'5". He was hilarious. I was mad about him now, but massive guy, 6'5", probably 20 stone.
Just imagine you opening the door to meet him.
Yeah, no, I opened the door to him one day. I was working with him for a long time, and he, like a lot of the guys, like they were under massive amounts of pressure from their families and their mothers, particularly because these guys just didn't know what to be doing with themselves in the morning and during the day. They didn't have any sort of get up and go and ambition to get out and do something. So the mothers would be putting pressure on them, going, "You ever get up out of bed? And would you get up and do this?" And eventually, they'd hit the mother a box or something. They'd flip, and the family dynamic would completely fall apart, and the family wouldn't be able to care for them anymore. That was a lot of it. Like the individual or the boy or the girl eventually wouldn't be able to manage a home, wouldn't be able to live at home, and then they'd go into care. But one time I arrived at this guy Christie's house, and he was covered in blood. The door naked at the door. Came to the door naked, a big lump of fella naked, covered in blood. Sister and the mother was hiding in the bedroom upstairs, and the daughter was hiding under piano in the hall. And I just start laughing at him. I says, "You put your fucking trousers on, you big idiot. You're standing out in the middle of the street." And he just started laughing. And we got him dressed and got him out and got him sorted. But he eventually got committed then on the back of that into Eata's in Portrane.
Where does blood come from, Ed?
He was after cutting his ear or doing something, but he wasn't after hurting anybody. He was after hurting himself. He had cut ear and all whatever.
Thank God.
Yeah, but he ended up locked up basically in a psychiatric institution. Now, if you were in any way high functioning, or if you were at a sort of very mild learning disability, there was nowhere for you to go. There was no services. So if you had to go into care, you were basically put in an institution and you were
There's
locked
no
up.
middle ground.
There's no middle ground at all. So I remember going out to visit him. I went out to try visit him around 2 or 3 weeks later, and they said, I said, "Oh, is Christy there?" And he says, "Yeah, he's here. Come on, we'll come in with him. We come into his bedroom." And I went, "No, hold on, no, I'm not going into his bedroom." And he went, "No, it's fine, it's fine." So she pulled me into the psychiatric nurse. Pulled me into the bedroom, and he was obviously he was busy, right? And he was busy, and she just kind of said, "God, come on, your friend's here to visit you, just whatever." And I'm just going, "Oh, she's could you just knocked? You know, you could have knocked, and you leave the poor young lad alone. Like, he's only a teenager,
No privacy in
no
there.
privacy whatsoever." And he was medicated up to the eyeballs, and he was sedated. And the next time I visited him, he was in a kind of a bull ring, walking around in circles, and massively sedated.
That bad.
And I just said,
And he shouldn't have been there.
No, I shouldn't have been there. And that was when I had enough, because I'd worked with loads of different guys like this, and there was no real future for them in services. So there was a guy that I was working with at the time, the social worker. I was kind of saying, "Oh, we have to do something about this. We have to go and change this." And like there's like, people should be able to. The problem with the whole sector at the time, learning disabilities, was that if you had Downs, you went here. If you had a mild disability, you went here. And if you lived in a particular area, that's where you went regardless. So you didn't have any choice. And if the service was crap or it was inefficient, you just went anyway, because that's all that was on offer to you. And still to this day, there's a lot of problems around sort of services for people with disabilities. Even they've become drastically deinstitutionalized now, but at the time, that's what people were put into. But he basically, he got locked up there, and he never came. I don't know if he could be out. It's a long time ago now, but I was wanted to do something about it. So I blagged. My father-in-law had a bed and breakfast they were building, and I said I'll rent it off him for 6 months.
The whole bed and breakfast.
The whole bed and breakfast. I said I'll rent off the bed. I'll rent the bed and breakfast, and I got the social worker to agree to come in with me, and I basically set up a respite service for guys with the same issues. So I used to take in residential people.
So who did you have to ask to? Could we house these here?
No, I went into the HSE, and I know we originally started with families. I went to families for respite. So if somebody needed respite, so if they had a kid like this who had issues at home, we had brochures that went out to families. Bizarrely, I found the brochure that I originally printed up on.
Go ahead, yes.
Yeah, I had the original one that I found. It was a little 3D. I did it myself, because I did the website myself. I did the pamphlets myself and everything. I did them on a little sort of publisher file, a 3-page little thing. I found it, just was in a drawer. But I had this. Basically, we just took them into a bed, and I did all the staffing myself. So I did all the residential staffing myself for 6 months. So I used to do 5-day shifts. So they were 24 hours a day. Well, you slept in the B&B.
You just had to be there with them in case
they
they
needed
with
them. Yeah. So you did sort of 16 hours plus sleep and 5 days in a row, and then went home basically to sleep then, and then repeated. So I did that for around 6 months. Was hardly at home the whole time doing it. I was exhausted, and we used to take in a couple of kids, but we got enough then to be able to take on one person. So I took on. I started full time in 2004, 2005. We got our first contract from the state then, which is a young autistic guy who was very violent. He was violent. He's a dolt of a kid, but he
didn't realize his own strength.
Yeah, no. He used to sort of walk around town where he was from and he used to get picked on because he looked a bit different, or he was an easy mark. Like, if he said to somebody, he'd shout, or if they said something to him, he'd shout back, or he'd threaten them, and then he'd get beaten up, and then he'd go home. But he'd go home and he'd try to get an exact revenge. He'd go home and get a knife. He'd go home and get a hurley or a knife or a blade, and go out, and he'd be on the street wandering around with a knife trying to find these guys to get back at them what he was after doing. So I got a contract to look after him. And then I was able to take on a staff member, then an additional staff member, and then another one, and then we got another contract and another contract. So we had
B&B must have been fairly full at that stage.
It's filled up at around 4 then eventually, and we had to look at another one. So we got another one out in Monastravan.
B&B.
Yeah, I was able to take on more staff. Then I was able to hire a psychiatrist. Then I've got a contract psychiatrist to come in to do sort of some work with us, because we couldn't get anybody to do it. But all the time, everybody was really difficult decision, because you were basically competing against charities. Like, we were a private company. So and I was adamant I didn't want it to be a charity, because like McDonald's, like I still to this day I believe in it. Like, people, you go into If you go into McDonald's and say, like, this is a shit burger, people stop buying it and go somewhere else, or they can complain about it, and there's a process. But
it has to get better, or it goes out of business.
Yeah, it has to get better or it goes out of business. With the charitable sector in Ireland, it doesn't work like that at all. Like, if you're lucky to be getting it, you're seen as an object of charity. Just because you have a learning disability, you're not a health consumer, you're an object of charity. And two, you can't complain or enact or move your money. So if you are really, really unhappy with the service that you're getting in your locality with your OT, your psychologist, or whatever, you're caught in that service indefinitely.
And you're nearly penalised if you complain.
And if you complain about it or you want to move out of it, you're left with, you can't go somewhere else. So I was adamant that when I was setting up the organisation back years ago, that it would be that sort of model that people could
get the best service
possible, and if they weren't happy, could move or could take their model elsewhere. So there's this concept called service brokerage, where you could basically service brokers were ones that could go out and shop for the best service for you. But basically, what we did was you just put together services for a person. So if they came in and they were autistic and they needed purpose-built, or they needed purpose-built
environment. So you'd interview the person, we see what they need.
Yeah, we do a full needs assessment. We go back to the health service and say, well, do they need that? They need X amount of psychological intervention. They need psychiatry. They need this. But we'd put everything together, and then we'd refuse to take them unless they agreed to what we were proposing. And so they just kind of, because the behaviors were so extreme, they used to agree to it. So
you were nearly specializing in the most extreme cases.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, so we ended up with being the challenge behavior service in the country for anyone who was who had complex behavioral issues. So,
and once there with you, was that all your responsibility?
Yeah, it was. It was all my responsibility. Yeah, it was like I literally. It's funny because
you must have been only a young lad still at that time.
I was only 24. I went back to college, I think, when I was 22 to do a degree in social care, and I qualified when I was around 26 through the Open Training College in Dublin. There was a specialist degree in disability studies. And by that time, I had so many staff working for me that no one really gave a shit what my qualifications were at that point. They only cared what the other people's qualifications were.
How did you balance the care and the business? The
business side was difficult because like I knew what to do. I knew how to do it. But trying to get other people to do that was an absolute nightmare, so... in the early stages, I did all the HR, I did all the accounts, I did all the bookkeeping, I did all the work, I did all the management. So
no sleeping for it.
No, so I started off all the while, like I was a young guy. I was getting married. I got married at 26. We had kids around 27. So to my wife Jade, we all through that, like we were rearing a family and we were trying to.
And was it financially going well, or was it?
No, it wasn't. I only started to make money maybe after around. God, it was around 5 years or so before we started to actually make any money out of it.
Did you ever want to give up?
I did. No, I never did. I was so busy all the time that I never really came up for air. It was funny because people develop these sort of opinions of you just because you're the boss or you look outwardly successful. So I remember like we were in awful amounts of trouble from people who were talking about unionization and
that
worked for me. Yeah. And there was one guy who I had worked with for years.
How many people had you at this stage?
Probably around 50 or so, 60
Jeez,
or
it got big quick.
Yeah, 50 or 60 at that point. But I remember there was a guy complaining, and I knew the guy because I used to work with him. I worked with him in the service years ago for years and years and years. He was one of my first hires. And he came into a meeting and he was giving out and saying, "Oh yeah, but no one's listening to us, and we want this, and we want this, and those people at the top." And he was saying this to me, and I'm like, "John, this it's fucking me. Like, it's what are you talking about?" And he went, "Oh yeah, it's it." But he said, "What are you talking about?" He just fucking come in and call me. Why are you doing this? He was aggravating other people into sort of doing whatever he wanted to do, and without actually coming and talking to me first. And then when realised that it was actually me, he just stopped and then just said, "Oh yeah, I suppose we could just ring and to have a chat to you." Because I was a real hands-on, relaxed type of guy. I wasn't a good operator. I was more of a leader than a manager. And wasn't really good at managing the sort of complexities of.
So how many houses were you in at that stage?
I'm not sure, but back when I was like we ended like it all sort of fuzzes into one. Like, but rolling forward back to around, I exited around I finished up around 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and at that point we did 60 and 1,500 people. So
What?
yeah, so I ended up with around 1,500 people.
And you were managing that on your own?
No, I wasn't. When I got to around 100, I started to lose control of it. So I just couldn't get people to do what you want to do. There was so many funny things. Like one, the care side of it was really, really complex because we were looking after people with severe issues. So people with frontal lobe damage, with learning disabilities, with autism, but also with massive behavioral component of some kind. So there was either violence, aggression, inappropriate sexualized behaviors. There was all sorts of really complex stuff, or self-harm, or eating disorders, all sorts of really sort of really complex stuff. And then you had to try manage all of this team and all the clinical people to actually manage those cases at the same time. But I remember this is a funny thing. We had this really funny case here. Well, it wasn't that funny, but it was sad. But we had this guy. He was very well able. He was a waiter in a restaurant at one point, but he developed this brain injury called Korsakoff syndrome, which was basically alcohol-induced brain damage. And he ended up somehow in a nursing home because his family had all abandoned him, and he was a very handsome guy, really good looking, in his 40s. Long hair, tan skin, but just basically had significant brain damage and short-term memory loss. But he used to hop out the windows of the nursing homes all the time and cause massive issues in the nursing homes. So we eventually set up this really complex. We set up this. He had some sort of level of independence, but he had care, underlying care, and he used to just row with people all of the time. But he had massive health issues because he'd forget to eat. He'd forget to take medication, and he had circulation problems, all sorts of things. So he needed a really, really complex care structure, but also some freedom to be able to go and do what he wanted to do and try not to fuel his alcoholism and have him to die. But he ended up, he disappeared. He disappeared one time, and it transpired one of the care workers that was employed was after falling in love with him.
And your employees?
Yeah. And basically said, "Oh, I'm taking him home with me. Like, there's nothing wrong with him. He's grand." Like, and basically took him away with him. So she was in her 40s, and so we were like, "Wait, this guy had disappeared. He'd gone." And the staff member had basically taken him. And so but he was a consenting adult. He was like,
so it was a slash kidnapping slash love story.
Yeah, slash love story. Yeah, but he was gone. And we were going, after a while, he was going, Jesus Christ, what are we going to tell the HSE? Because this guy's after being taken and gone. But he only lasted around 4 days before she kind of went, fuck,
I can't handle him.
I can't handle this, and he got.
But when it was at that stage, obviously it's making money then, right? So financially it's doing well. But your head, was there a stage where you went, I can't, my head is just fried? Or
well, I always I always said to myself, I wanted to get out by the time I was around 40, like 43, because my dad died at 43. I'm actually 43 now, and it was a major. I just didn't want to do that to my own kids. I didn't want to put myself through.
Was it all consuming?
Yeah, all consuming. Like people didn't realize like the amount of pressure and the amount of stress, because it wasn't just the behaviors and the issues. Like we had stuff. Like we were dealing with the most complex stuff, pre-newspaper stuff. Our job was basically not to keep stuff out of the newspapers, but it was about to hit the press, and the HSE would at last ditch effort approach you to try deal with, or to the Department of Justice, or we were taking people diversion programs, juvenile diversion programs, to get them out and to get them stopped from being locked up. But usually there was massive amounts of pressure and stress about these things. They were really high pressure cases. But on top of that, the staff member, you also had all of these families to feed. Like there was like 100 staff at a particular point. You're trying to get them to all do things the way you wanted it done. And some people just do completely the opposite. Like they just wouldn't do as they were told, or they couldn't, or they didn't know how. And so, like the crux of it came when my uncle came to work for me. He was running a maintenance service, and he came to work for me. And we knew quicker that we knew more about dishwashers breaking down and washing machines and kit within the service than we did service breaking down or staff doing what they were supposed to be doing, because of the maintenance systems, the structures that we had in place. And we had no control. Like we were going in to tell the HSE, well, we're doing it this way and this way and this way, but yet with the care plans and everything said they were, but we couldn't actually get the staff to do it because just the management structures weren't there. So there was a guy that my uncle Noel at the time, he said, look, Ed, like I used to work he used to work in Tesco's. He had a massive number of people working under him, thousands of people, and he worked in this Six Sigma lean management structure. So he said, look, I'll come in and I'll help you. I'll get to help you get a control of what's going on, and I'll sort of put structures and systems, and I'll bow out. I'll help you with the policy procedures to get out, and then I'll bow out and go on. But he never left. Actually, he just came to work for me then as a operations director, and actually he went on to be CEO of the organization then recently. So, but we had all the people that were in the early stages, like there was Danica and Shane and people who
And
worked
they
in the
still,
early stages.
they're,
Still there.
and you left.
I left. That they were senior, so I always said that I was going to leave. So I always my ambition was to just get out and to.
Did you find it hard to leave?
Retire? I did, but I didn't want to be. It's funny when you're in something like that. I just wanted away from it. I didn't want to be.
Even though it was something that you built yourself that actually does good. Did you not think, God, this is my baby?
It is, yeah, but it's still like when you're faced with the prospect of potentially dying of a heart attack when you're 43 and leaving your children traumatized by that sort of thing.
Yeah, that'd do it.
You're saying, you know what, I just can't do that to myself. And I was all through that period, I was massively stressed. I had in and out of like at one point I thought I was having a heart attack when I was around in my mid-30s, and I was actually just saying, I just realized it was an anxiety. It was just, I was having anxiety attacks all the time because of the level of pressure. Because I had a family, I had hundreds of staff. I had to deal with the caseload that we were working on, and I just couldn't hack it. And when I realized what it was, that it was anxiety, I was grand then because I was a bit of control freak. I was fine with actually dealing with that once I knew what it was.
Can you remember the day you left? That you had that's it, I'm done now.
I can, yeah, but I started a process back when I was in my 30s to start preparing the business to be moved on, and I didn't leave immediately. So what I did was I took on a business partner. A guy bought the business off me, bought the majority of it off me, and then I sort of felt the stress come off it then. Like I still owned a significant proportion of the business, but it wasn't all on me then. I had a big board of directors. There was, like, at that point we had like that, we had 1,500 staff. We had the biggest clinical team in Ireland. Like I was overseeing the biggest clinical and forensic team in Ireland for people with learning disabilities.
That's
so
cool.
We had 60 or 70 clinicians of speech and language, forensics, psychiatry, psychology, neuropsychiatry, and this thing that we were shit hot. We were absolutely shit hot. So there was massive issues in the public system with people having sort of neurological issues, and say if you were getting seizures, right? Seizures can induce massive behavioral problems afterwards or before, and there was a lot of kids who had this sort of stuff, and they'd give massive challenging behaviors, massively violent, but it could have been a precursor to a seizure or a post. But in the public system, they'd be waiting to see a neuropsychiatrist for like around 18 months. In the meantime, they'd be absolutely their own lives would be torture and their families' lives would be torture. But we were able to do that within 2 days. We'd get in, get somebody completely assessed, send them for CTs, get whatever team was needed immediately, and actually deal with the problem immediately. And as a result, we were able to actually stabilize people really, really quickly, get them back to baseline, get them back to independence, and move them on. So we ended up building this massive service where we had high support stuff, right the way down to independent living. And we took somebody who was like really, really dependent and in real difficult situation, and then over a period of months or years, be able to actually move them until they were completely out and gone and moved on.
You're still very passionate about the whole thing, though.
Yeah, I was very good at it. I loved doing it, but I just didn't want to basically get to 43 and still be doing it, you know.
What was the first thing you done to spoil yourself when you left?
I didn't really. I was lucky in that I had done loads of stupid things while I was in it. So like throughout the whole the building of the business, I started to probably make money after around 10 years. And then I had sort of things that I bought, or I used to piss around with cars, and like
what was the first thing you bought when you had a few pound?
I bought a 1967 cherry red Mustang coupe but that was with my SSAA money. So I got, because I didn't need, I got to the point, I had the SSAA, all of my brother and my sister, we topped up the SSAA to the max and got that. But basically got to a point where I had a job, I had a few quid, so I didn't need the money to go back into anything of them. So I just blew the whole lot of it on a car.
Why not?
Yeah. But then that that was sort of a trigger. Like it was one of the triggers actually that dragged me down. Like I was not dragging me down the country, but we were living in. When I bought that, we were living in a housing estate still up in Newbridge, and at the same time, that was when the recession hit. 2008, a recession hit, and I just felt so bad. I just couldn't. There was 4 or 5 people on our road who had just lost their jobs. Who everybody was hurting at that time, and I just couldn't. I just felt so bad about.
You were feeling guilty.
I was just feeling really guilty
for being successful
at the time about being successful. So I was saying to Jade, "Look, let's try find a place we can build somewhere else, and in the middle of nowhere where."
Don't you dare call where I'm from
the middle of nowhere. But to me, it was the middle of nowhere. I didn't even know Mount Rath existed before I actually came down here. It was hilarious. Like if you ask me, because we were looking at a site around Kildare at the time years ago, and we were looking at a site, and it was right at the top of the boom. And some guy, I offered the fella the money he wanted for the site as advertised, and he came back, no other bidders, and said 20 grand more. And I said, you know what, feck you, I said, and I said no. And we went down to view. There was another site at the same time for the same price, but much bigger. It was around 9 acres in the middle of nowhere, and arrived down into the middle of this hayfield with a river running through it, and went, my God, this is amazing. This place is amazing. Like we're a kilometre from the nearest, 600 meters from the nearest house. We're in all the schools locally. There was like 6 kids in the primary school down the road. The quality of life looked absolutely amazing to a dub. Like this was like paradise. So then decided to move down there, and so I could hide me coupe Mustang in the middle of a field and no one could see it.
It's mad because either you keep a low profile or I go nowhere. Because I went to the Cannonball, the first Cannonball that I went to, and I remember the Ford GT. Like the sexiest car ever. And Bob goes, he's from around where you're from, like. And I was like, couldn't be. Sure, I know everyone from around there.
But it was funny because I met you the first time. I was like, fuck, that's a local fella. I don't want him knowing me, But like, I always did sort of keep my head down. I don't really, even in business, I always kept my head down because I didn't go on the media. I didn't talk. And like New was enormous. Like it's a big business. Like New employs more people than Microsoft in Ireland now, and no one ever knows about it. And it's probably because of the type of work that it does.
How'd you pick the name?
Just at the time, Nua. I love Irish names for businesses. Like I'm involved in several startups, and they all have Irish names. We had. I just like that. I'm not even an Irish speaker. Like I know a little bit of Irish, but I just like I like Irish brands. I like the themes.
How long were you left? Did you said, I think I'd like to start more businesses or invest in more businesses?
Well,
were you always doing that?
I said I was never going to go in and do something again that required that much pressure or stress, so I wasn't going to do that to myself. So I was doing sort of passive stuff. So I got involved. Like I only when I sort of got the investor, we grew it drastically in a few years until it was sold, and then I left at that point. It was completely gone. And they put a new management team in place, and I trailed off. But I was probably only out the door a day, and I kind of said to myself that I wanted to do something new.
So you still wanted to do something. You wanted to.
I didn't want to actually get involved in anything that was going to bring me stress. So I was heavily involved in philanthropic stuff for years, and I wanted to really do more of that. So I run a foundation. When I made a few bob, I kind of wanted to sort of focus on sort of spending a few quid on things that I wanted to do, different things. I did some stuff in the local community, like I've got involved in here in this building, but I did a lot of projects abroad. I did a lot of projects in Ireland on philanthropic stuff that I kind of don't mix everything in baskets in business. I keep business over here. I'd keep my sort of social stuff over here. I'd keep the car stuff in another bit, or the philanthropic stuff elsewhere. So I wouldn't jump up and down about what I do. So
you keep it under your hat.
Yeah. It was really funny. It was years ago when I was in the HSE. I was working with the HSE. I remember going in to talk to a guy about a contract and everything, and he just gave out for the first 15 minutes about the last guy who was in, who drove a nice car. drove a top of the range Mercedes to the meeting, and from then I always thought, "Jeez, you've never come to a meeting in a new car." When you're meeting a civil servant, you usually get a lift out and dropped outside.
Just buy an old shit car.
yeah, buying a shit car for going to the meetings. But no. When I finished up, I had sort of involved in a couple of different projects. There was a good friend of mine, another friend of mine, Dave. He lives in Spain.
Not Kettletop Dave.
Not Kettletop Dave. No, Dave, Spanish Dave. Well, he's not really Spanish, so he emigrated over to Spain around 7 or 8 years ago and is living out there with his family now. But we run a business together from there in the States, selling tools on Amazon. Bizarrely, yeah.
How'd you get into that?
Just that was his background. He was really, that was his life's business. He was always selling tools nationally and internationally. He was an international sales director for a big brand and wanted to go out and do something on his own. And he was exploring the idea of going to Dubai and Middle East and things, and then went out into the US. And at the time, I was looking for stuff to invest in and to get involved in stuff. And my missus is very dubious now. She just doesn't buy it. She says, like, I think you just...
Want to go on holidays?
I think you just invested in Dave's business so you could just hang out with each other. And I'm like, fucking, that's not true. That's not true at all. So, but yeah, so we do that together. We've been working together for around 4 or 5 years, building a business in the States. So, and that's a bit of fun. That's not fun at all. I mean,
and how many businesses do you sort of tinker with?
I've restricted. I'm involved in a brewery, so I've involved in the brewery Galway Bay and brew for the last number of years. We've bars, restaurants, and the main brewery out in Galway. So I've been doing that for a few years. We did a merger we merged Brew and Galway Bay back a year and a half ago, just over a year ago. So that's one that I chair. I do some voluntary stuff here. I chair the local community enterprise thing. This Bloom HQ building I chair. And then I've the tool business, but most of the time it's all philanthropic stuff now. I'm mostly involved in different projects.
So what's your typical day now?
It could be anything. Like I'm after. Sometimes your brain will be fried because you go on to like conversations. You could be talking about 20 different types of different things in one day, from a conversation about something in a brewery to a project out in Africa, or a project in a different country, or a community project in Dublin, and you could be on 20 different topics in one day, so you'd be fried. So I thought I was going to completely exit out of social care, but I was involved in a advocacy project to try change direct provision. So I was I've done projects, like I run a fund basically. So I don't believe in handing my kids all my money. So I want to invest in sort of social programs and social projects all around the world, or just for doing good with my money rather than handing my kids a lump of money in retirement. Sorry, kids, you're not getting fucking anything.
Kids are going to be raging. I don't mind. They're fierce, nice chaps.
But yeah, so I went and I was involved with this one project. I was very passionate about. I think direct provision is the next. It's the next scandal of our time. There's been children who are growing up in caravans and hotels for their whole lives, 10 years of age, and have missed out on opportunities for proper education, for inclusion, for seeing their families work, seeing their mum and dads cook a dinner, and they arrive in this country from other places seeking sanctuary and are kept in limbo for 10 years. Like, the government should have at the time either deported them or allowed them to stay, or processed it quickly. So the people have been living in hotels and dilapidated type arrangements and caravans, and there was never any social care operators in that sector. It was all hoteliers or people who were basically providing bedroom and board. So people had approached me a couple of years ago, Children's Rights Alliance and the Community Foundation of Ireland, going like, why aren't you guys doing this? Why aren't NUA doing this sort of work? And I go, well, look, we don't provide beds. We provide social care. We provide wraparound services. We look after people. We provide care planning for people. We don't just provide beds and food. And that's what the government was basically looking for at the time. So I set about doing a couple of different change advocacy programs. So we hired a change advocate for getting equal rights for status for children under the Ombudsman, and I think equal children's allowance. And they were very successful at that. They sort of just basically aggravated the government. Myself and another guy, Mike, paid the salary of this girl for a couple of years to basically just aggravate for change, and she was really good at got a load of changes for children, for migrant children. And then we got the same crowd working on a bunch of standards for disability, standards for HICWA standards for centres to try bring up the standard. But one or two, when I had left Nua, people were still saying, well, look, it's not changing, things aren't happening, why don't you do it? And I just said, oh, fuck it, I do it. So I set up a pilot program, what I thought could look like. Everybody's complaining about direct provision and everyone's saying it should shut, but nobody's actually coming out of the woodwork and actually going, well, this is what it should be like, and this is what you should do. So we set up a pilot project around a number of homes, sort of dispersed within communities, spread out all over the place, with a social care team in the middle who basically support people to integrate and to run a care plan with those people who are from Syria or from Afghanistan or from different countries that they're coming from. So we try to integrate them from the minute they arrive, as opposed to just lumping them in a hotel room for a year. They become institutionalized at the end of the year. They're not work. It's harder for them to integrate and harder for them to get a job if all they've done is sit in a hotel room for a year. So we build or integrate people, support them through social care.
When you're watching, because you're experienced at what you do, and when you're watching stuff unfold with the government and the HSE, and you see these things, can you see mistakes happening and go, God, what are you doing? What is happening here?
Yeah, they're still. But look, like it happens all the time. And people don't realize that. People think, oh, government is going to change. Government, things are going to change. But the reality is, it's the same civil service that's been there. It's the same people. Like, your Minister for Health will change once every 4 years or now every 2 years.
But the people doing the services
doing the services don't. They're in there all the time. Like, your civil servants are there all the time. They're the people that are running the show. Your politicians are temporary. They come in and out. And they're fighting the battle, those politicians as well, for change. But they won't change things that quick. So they do make mistakes, and even around the whole sort of not-for-profit argument, for-profit argument in direct provision services, it's wrong, because basically it wasn't for profit or not-for-profit that created bad services in Ireland. It was the fact that they procured beds and room and board. They didn't procure services for people, whereas they actually put services out for tender, out for to actually care for people, human beings. They would have got high-quality services and they would have got good value for money.
So if Ed Dunne was made the boss over the HSE, what would the 4 changes that you'd make that would make it better?
Oh, I wouldn't even start to. I couldn't even. You'd have to dismantle it. Basically, you'd have to dismantle the structures.
Is it just a mess?
It's just a mess. And even talking to some of the senior people years ago in the mental health services, they're all really caring and good people. They do care. But so the only key changes in the HSE ever happened over the last 20 years was the change in the sticker in the van on the side of the vans. The RHA, the years, that's all that changed. But I never get caught up in politics. I never get involved in it. I like doing stuff and doing projects to change. And I'm hopeful that the project that I'm doing now is going to make a big difference. Now we're starting to get real traction. We had we looked after around 150 people in the last crisis recently. And now we're getting big traction governmentally. But I'm doing that. I'm doing it as it's a social enterprise now. I'm not doing a not-for-profit. I'm not doing a for-profit company again. I've committed to give away my shareholding to charity or the majority of my shareholding to charity when I'm done. Once I've achieved the model and shown people how to do it, that other people can copy it, I'm going to exit and do it. But I'm just doing it for the crack now.
What's your most fun part of the week?
Mike, I love being a dad. I love hanging out with my kids, being with my family. We're all sort of mates now. I have 4 children. I have 2 boys and 2 girls, 2 16-year-olds.
How do you manage not to spoil them?
I think you do spoil them. I think you do spoil them all the time. But you have to sort of keep them grounded and talk to them as people and remind them that there's other people out there that have struggle and have problems, and the kids don't, probably like you said, like you say with your own, they don't give a shit. They live in the moment. You know what I mean? You're just trying to guide them through their little issues and happenings, whatever happens. But I don't have a one key favorite moment of the week, but I just like spending time with my kids and having.
And how many kids have you?
I have 4. So I've started. My baby is 11. He's probably bigger than you now at this stage.
He's bigger than me.
He's a lump, yeah.
He nearly broke my rib.
Yeah, he's very funny kid as well. He's just I don't know where we got him from, but he's just an absolute messer. So he started talking really young as well. He was like around 1.5, and a neighbour came in the door and he says, "Well, Morgan, how are you?" And he says, "I'm grand, yourself." And he was 5, and he he said, "Oh, what do you want to do when you grow up, Morgan?" He says, "Play hurling and never get married." I think he was only 5. Yeah, and he came in there the other day. He says, "Oh, you don't look very happy. You two, you and your you and mom, you don't look very happy. Maybe you should get a divorce." I said, "What are you saying? I have 2 Christmases, 2 Christmases, 2 birthdays." Yeah. So he's funny. Yeah, and I have older boy. He's 14, Jack. So he's a real engineer, mechanical, interested in everything. So wants to be building, working his hands, building cars, doing projects, and so we do very hands-on stuff at home. Like I wanted the kids to they want to be pissing around the social media stuff, but a lot of them, I don't want them just doing random stupid stuff and putting it on TikTok. So we started messing around with the social media and YouTube and things years ago, just building cars or building a project where it actually had them doing something meaningful and learning a skill. So it kind of got out of control. Those and we started doing.
You've built some epic projects.
We started doing bigger and bigger projects. Yeah, so we built a Ghostbusters car last year. That was
epic.
Yeah, we're in the middle of building an Isetta at the moment, which is an old like bubble car, but we're going to do an electric conversion in it. So so I started that social media shit messing years ago because I couldn't doing public service contract stuff. I just couldn't have a personal profile. So anytime you're going to car shows or messing around or doing things, we had to alter ego. Yeah.
What's your favorite car?
I think probably the 67 Volkswagen bus because of the memories. I traveled all over France and in it years ago. We took the family all over Europe for 5 years in a row. So rode it off twice on French trips. Had to get
You rode that off twice?
Somebody crashed into the back of us, crunched the thing, had to get transported back. Another time, burnt the engine out of a 2-litre petrol engine, just exploded and left the missus and the kids on the side of the road and had to get them flown back. Left the car, not happy. She won't even get into it now. It's like little Miss Sunshine.
She doesn't trust it.
No, you have to be able to push it. Like anyone who has one of them has to learn how they have to actually be able to jumpstart a car because they always break down.
How did you get into cars?
I don't know. I just started with one and then we just started looking at I got a Mini. Oh no, I think I started with a Mustang, then just never sold it. And then started building a custom bus then, and then didn't sell that. And I got a Mini, but then eventually got rid of that and just started collecting stuff. You know, I was talking to a lot of people over the years around sort of finance and investment, especially if you start to make a few quid, and they just didn't trust any of them. Like, you know, just didn't trust I remember working with a pension advisor with 2 or 3 staff years ago who sold 6 pensions to my team members. And we tried to unwind the pension around 7 years later and unwind the pension 7 years later and actually flip it into a new policy for the staff to get a better deal for them. And it turned out all the fees had been actually paid in the first 7 years and the guys had nothing. They had all of the bank fees and the pension fund fees already taken out 7 years in advance and there was nothing in the end of it for them. So they had to, I think there was like 15,000 euros gone that they had put these guys, and they'd worked hard for it, these staff. So we ended up, the company actually went in and we actually just replaced it for them and gave them a new pension scheme. But I just didn't trust them. And I figured if you had
trust them now?
No, I don't know. No, but if you had a classic car, at least you could go out and see it. You could park in the driveway.
Tangible.
It's a tangible asset, and you could go out. And if, like, I don't know anybody who's lost money over the last couple of years on buying classic cars, and there could be a bit of a dip coming, you know. But they haven't. Nobody I know has lost any money on them.
And your dream of being a pilot?
Yeah,
helicopter?
Yeah. No, I've learned how to become. I can fly a helicopter now. I can fly. I can not die. If I sneeze, that's about the height of it.
Is it that hard drive a helicopter? Well,
you're used to quite complex movements with your hands at yourself in that machine of yours up in the.
But I watched a thing on YouTube that if you done a certain movement with a helicopter, it's unretrievable. Like if you just push forward or something. Is that true?
I think they tell everybody else who fly helicopters not to watch that YouTube video, maybe. So yeah, don't watch that. I don't fucking know. They're not the type of YouTube videos that I'd be looking up.
Have you ever had a scary moment?
Yeah, it was really funny. I was landing one time, and there was a guy. There was a fella. It was kind of a nervous pilot anyway. Like he wasn't an instructor, but he was a nervous pilot. Yeah, and he was. I was like beep 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 and everything. And I thought I was in control of the helicopter, but he was holding it really tight, and I was pushing it, and he was pulling it. I was pushing, he was pushing it, but I was pushing turning the engine off basically, and all the beeps, and he turns around, let go of the fucking controls, let go of the controls. And I'm, okay, but it was me. I was heading for the ground.
I've watched too much air crash investigation to think that that's cool.
Yeah, but helicopters are like they're not like they're like I don't think they're that dangerous compared to like getting into a car. Like there's a 50-point safety check every time you get into a helicopter, and you have to check every single thing first off before you actually take off. Whereas you get into a car, you just like turn it on and off you go in the middle of fog. And
Where do you go in it?
just go anywhere. You just like, it's like a hobby thing. You just pick up and go somewhere.
Do you have to tell, like, do you have to tell people, oh, I'm going to be flying through here at a certain
You
time?
do. You have to hit flight plans, or depending on how far you're going, you have to submit flight plans. You're in constant contact with different radio stations all around Ireland. You'd be going through Shannon region, you'd be chatting. But lots of, all these guys who are doing this are all hobbyists. They're all just want to fly.
But I often wondered, if you just say you wanted to fly from your house and you want to go to Dublin, how far in can you fly?
You can't fly to any sort of control security zones. You have to get permission. So if you can't fly around Baldonnel, or you can't mess around in areas where there's planes landing, like there's a clear zones around Dublin Airport and Shannon Airport, you can't fly near. So you have to pick specific places to go to. But like that, it's just a hobby. You know, there's a friend of mine that does it. He's just late in life. He's a judge, and he spent his whole life as a barrister and judge. I've always wanted to fly, I always wanted to do it, and he's doing lessons now and having great crack at it. But I was in the back of the helicopter a few weeks ago with him, thinking I was going to die, because he was like doing the normal rate of descent. The advisable is around 500 feet per minute, and he's going around 2,000 feet towards the thing. And then the guy, the flight instructor's just going, you might want to pull up there, Brian. You might pull up there, Brian. I'm going to fuck him all up.
I'd shite myself.
Yeah, but it's a bit of crack, you know. So I've got the kids up doing it a couple of times as well. So I think Jack probably wants to be a pilot. He's itching towards doing it, or an engineer anyway. So, but you learn so much about machines and the helicopter and flight dynamics and everything in that process that you can probably do it.
After all the projects you've done, were you always good at mechanicking, or have you got better?
I was always a Lego kid, you know. I don't do the sort of mechanical work on the engines myself. Not that I probably could if I.
It's another day, isn't
put
it?
my mind to it. It's another day,
Another day.
time. But there's always like there's a mate that you know, Dave, who's just a wizard at it, and he's just brilliant. And why would you try to get good at something he can do, like he'd do for you? You know, there's masters of their trade out there. Like, you wouldn't touch paint on a car. You wouldn't touch, like, why would you go at something that someone else could do a way better job at? You know, there was a guy up the road here, Paddy, who used to be like one of the main go-to guys in the whole country for carburetors.
Great.
Yeah, and everybody knew him to go to fix your carburetor if you have problem with guys all over the country. But to tune carburetors. But like that's the type of stuff you want when you're doing those sort of cars. You want somebody who's really, really good at it.
You ready for the hard questions?
Yes.
You don't have to answer them. But everyone's going to think you're a loser if you don't. We'll start off with a few of the simple ones. They aren't that simple, but they're simple enough. For a lad like you, no fucking bother. Here we go. I do sometimes think, nobody wants to hear these questions. And then if I don't ask them, I get about 100 messages going, you didn't fucking ask the questions, could he? What's your most vivid childhood memory?
God. I think there's a few. Oh jeez, what was it? I remember dropping a block on my sister's finger when I was a kid. Yeah, that's one of them. That was an accident. I didn't do that deliberately.
I don't know the way you said it.
Yeah, but I used to dump the dirty washing over the banisters down on top of their heads all the time. I remember doing that.
Skid marks on the head. Would you like yourself if you met yourself?
Oh, I think I'd probably bore me or annoy me. Yeah, in some way. No, probably. I don't
Why
know.
do you think you're annoying?
No, but I think I'd probably annoy myself. Yeah.
If you had to ask one person a question and they had to answer truthfully, who and what would it be?
Oh, I don't know.
That's a really hard one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Who brings you the most happiness in your life?
Oh, my children, definitely. Yeah, my family.
Sorry about that, Jade.
Yeah. Sorry.
Do you think things happen for a reason, or do we find reasons after things happen?
I don't think anything happens for a reason. I think just we all sort of plod through life and things happen to us, and we find a reason in them afterwards. Yeah.
Do you believe in God?
Nope.
What do you think happens after you die?
You turn into a big lump of goo and you rot down into the ground and you become plants. There's a really good service that I read about recently that they actually give you back in a bag of compost, and they can like just put you on a tree. And
I seen that.
Go. Yeah, I'd love to
That's
do that.
actually cool.
Great. Actually, you turn into something rather than sort of a place for people to go. And
I love trees. Like, so
you
imagine you can plant yourself as a tree, especially if it's softwood, and I might get to cut you down someday.
Yeah.
Could you stop working forever and not do anything?
No, never. I'm always doing something. Like, I've always never stopped ever doing something. I always have a project on. You know, I always take on projects and take on campaigns and don't stop, you know.
And is that because you financially couldn't, or because mentally you couldn't?
No, I'm like I just get it into my head that I have to do something and I do it. Like, you know, it's funny. We adopted a child. We adopted one of our daughters is adopted. I spent that was a sort of an arduous process. It took years upon years
Did you
upon
just
years.
decide you wanted to adopt someone, or how did that
No, I
come
was.
about?
This is probably a very long story, David. And your book is wide open there. But
I have time.
yeah, but I literally I sold my business in the early stages, and I went to a fundraiser, and I was there was guys out there sort of shaking buckets and trying to raise money for orphans out in Moldova, and I went to the fundraiser anyway, and I had a few quid in my back pocket, and they were doing a campaign to try raise money for 40. One of the things they were trying to raise money for was to fund 40 PAs or personal assistants for children with learning disabilities in this orphanage. So I basically wrote the check for the 40 people. I went up and gave them the money for it. But I went up and said, look, well, I said, I'm an expert in this sort of stuff. And I said, well, I want to go out and see how you're spending the money, and I want to go out and have a look, and I want to
Check it up.
but I want to make sure that what you're doing is that I can help. I can be. I wasn't checking on it, but I wanted to help them be more effective about how they spend the money. So I went out and I found that the service was what that they were offering with the money it wasn't exactly what I had asked them to do, but I kind of turned a blind eye to it. I wanted them to sort of spread the money over a number of years and keep people in consistent jobs for a long period of time, but they hadn't. They had just thrown all 40 onto the floor all at one time, and there was people sort of shaking rattles or brushing people's hair. There was children with severe to profound learning disabilities, people with just mild physical disabilities, and but these people were sort of standing beside them and sort of combing their hair and doing things, and I didn't think it was a very good, effective way of using funds, and there was better ways to be able to support people into better care situations. So especially sort of like, there's no reason in this day and age there is no institutions in Ireland, because children are in foster care in Ireland, or they're in supported living arrangements.
And out there they were in institutions.
And then they were in institutions, and this Irish charity was like pumping massive amounts of money into just sustaining that and making it better for them, but not really moving anybody on. So I said, well, look, how about we run a project and I'll fund it, where we buy 3 care homes out there. We train the social services out there to train all the carers how to be effective social care workers, how to run a care plan for an individual.
You basically started another new out there.
Started another sort of Moldovan type situation, but supported a charity to do it. So gave them the money and the funds, and basically flew. So I flew out, and I was absolutely sort of struck by what was going on. And I remember there was this, we were in this sort of 3-floor institution. We were sort of flown in the dead, and you're arriving in the dark. You're arriving out to this institution in the middle of nowhere, real sort of Eastern Bloc stuff. And it's cold, snow everywhere, and you go out, and we were kept in the institution for around 3 days, and then flew back out. But the situation was horrible. I was nosy. I was wandering around, and kids were sort of being fed porridge out of buckets and stuff. And but there was one sort of cohort of kids. There was around 13 of them, who were a little bit more able-bodied and able, but most of them had physical disabilities. 1 or 2 of them had sort of facial dysmorphia, different things, but they were sort of kept in one sort of area, and it was sort of set up like a normal home. And basically, I remember the CEO of the charity telling me that one particular girl, this little one, she's a gorgeous little thing, she's beautiful. She basically said, "Oh, I don't know how that girl can sort of be near you or approach men. Like, she's just I've never seen her do that before, sitting on your lap and chatting to her." And she'd my hat on, it is peaked hat, and she's told me that her mother was violently beaten to death in front of her when she was a baby, and she's an aversion to men. And that I don't know how she's that. And I remember going back to this. There was this little house at the side of the orphanage that we were kept in, and we back. And I remember I'm a strong guy now. I'm well able for humanity and listening to people, but I cried myself to sleep that night. I cried thinking about that child, and I cemented my sort of support for the charity and really what I was going to do and help them and give them money. And so I started off on this project. My first port call was actually start to get a care home, to try to acquire one first, but also to actually bring 13 of these children to Ireland And over the period of time, like myself and the missus had talked about whether we'd adopt a child, and we just kind of said no, like we couldn't, because just we really wanted to do it, but it was just the notion of taking a child with a learning disability and the effect that it would happen on our own children. It was just too much for us to be able to do, and we just said we wouldn't do it. But we do whatever we could for those kids while we could, so we'd support them as best we could. Like other donors, there was exceptional other Irish donors there who had buried massive amounts of money into the charity over the years, putting heating and food and stuff into the place, and they were absolutely wonderful people. But I ended up we were trying to negotiate a care home but it just so happened that one of the individuals, the CEO, owned the house, but it was near. We said we tried to buy this house, and because it was near the orphanage, and we tried to place 6 kids in that with a care structure like what Nua was doing. But I'd give them all the policy procedures, the structures, the ways of training. So we started to put in all the e-learning programs, the training programs with the Moldovan government. And we got a sort of memorandum of understanding with the government that they'd allow this to be legal, because you couldn't place a child outside of an orphanage. It couldn't be legal. So we had to put a legal framework in place. So we did that. And then I said I'd take the 13 children to Ireland to basically show how people with learning disability live in Ireland. So we took them on a tour of Ireland and introduced them to the children. There were some of the children that I'd cared for over time, that they could see, well, look at these kids. These are going off and living completely independent lives, and you could too. But during that time, there was a little girl that I had noticed. I had noticed in that period of time. She was in that group, but she was around 7, and she was. We had seen her before in the thing, but I hadn't been around her, and she was hanging around. We went out for a meal one day with the kids to this big social. We took all the children out. We took them to Chocolate Factory for the day in Butlers, and then my kids were all hanging around with this group. And one of the little girls, Morgan was sort of being a play act, and he was being the funny man. He was only 4 at the time, and he's being the funny man. He knocked his drink over. He started bawling his eyes out, crying, because he was embarrassed over spilling the drink, because he was a little kid. And this little girl just sort of went up to him and started rubbing his face and hugging him and going, "Are you all right? It's okay." And just myself and the missus looked at each other and went, "No, she's ours, you know." And just made a commitment to adopt
Just like
her.
that.
Just like that, yeah. Made a commitment to adopt her. So like
that's mad.
Yeah,
It's
we made
amazing.
a commitment, and we approached the charity director, the CEO, and said, like, we want to adopt this child. And so we made a commitment to do it, but we didn't realize it. Like, just so I contacted Tuzla, came straight back and said, like, I'm going to adopt this kid. And they went, "Oh, well, you know, you can't adopt a child without going to you can't adopt a child without applying to Tuzla first. And by the way, you can't adopt from that country anyway. Like, there was 36 countries in the world that you can adopt from, and but that doesn't mean that the Irish government will facilitate that. They'll only facilitate an adoption where they have a bilateral agreement with the country. It's got an inter-country agreement with, and they only had that with 7 countries, and Moldova wasn't one of them.
Right.
So they said no. So they said, "We're not doing it." And I said, "Well, you are doing it." And they said, "No, you're not doing that." So I had to go and challenge the Irish Adoption Authority and go in with them. And I took a barrister with me and a solicitor with me and said, I'm going to adopt that child, and we want you to set up an inter-country program. And they were fighting, and then the barristers were fighting, and I ended up, we got a hearing with the full board of the Irish Adoption Authority of Ireland, and I was told by the barrister that they don't typically like intercountry adoption. They don't want to do it. They didn't want to do it in the first place. It wouldn't facilitate it. And they were bickering away, and I told everybody to shut up, and I said, "Look, you don't realize this. I just finished up, retired down on my business around 3 or 4 months ago. I have nothing else to do. I'm going to sit outside your office for the next year until you do this." And just 3 of them start laughing, and I says, "I'm deadly serious. I said, all I will do is this from now on until you do it." And they let me do it. They let me set up the program.
How long did that take?
It took a long time. We had to set up an organization in Moldova to get an organization in Moldova, get an organization in Ireland to get accredited. They actually wouldn't pay for it. I had to pay for the whole structure program. So we got the entire program set up. I remember going to seek advice from a guy, Michael, who's a sort of very well-known healthcare entrepreneur. And he had gone through the Haiti process, and he told me, he said, "Look, just do what you can for the job. You might as well give up. You'll never get there." He tried to do it for Haiti, eventually got it, and one of the child that he was trying to do during that period sadly died of cholera during the period of time while he was trying to set up the program. He eventually got it, but the government wanted the Haiti program because they wanted children of colour to be able to adopt it into Ireland, but they didn't want Moldova. They didn't want Moldova to do it, but we eventually got this program set up and established. But if you wanted to adopt a child, you had to go through their process. So I contacted Tuzla during that period saying, look, we're adopting this child. And he says, oh, no, you have to go to the information day first. I says, when's the information day? 6 months' time. And I go, what the fuck do you mean 6 months' time? He says, like, this child's over here now. No, maybe one in May. Come to the information evening in May. So go to the information evening. Eventually, you're waiting months to go to the information evening. You go to that, then they allocate. They say, oh, well, look, now we've told you what adoption's all about. You still want to do it? And you're going, fucking absolutely. I told you want to do it. Allocate a social worker. Oh, no, that'll be 6 months. So I just hit the roof. I start saying, look, I start writing letters and I know how to work the system, and I start pushing, and they eventually let us allocate us a social worker, and we went to the open evening and we got allocated a social worker for assessment. So we were pushing to get that done, and that took a long time. We had to set up the structures internationally and nationally to get it done, but then get assessed at the same time, go through the whole process and get approved for adopting. And we had to fight because you're not supposed to adopt a child you don't know, that you know. You go through a period of time where you just say, oh, I'm going to adopt a kid. I want to adopt a kid. And you say, they go off and find one for you. You're not allowed. You have to sort of justify the reasons why you wanted to adopt that child particularly. So we got through all that process. And I felt so sorry for people during it because, like, we had resources. We had the money to pay for all of this. We were able to do it. But
it's not possible for most people.
No, 20 other couples there of like, there was gay couples, there was couples who were a bit older, couples who'd been through all sorts of IVF challenges and everything, and they were at their last ditch resort to try to have a child, and they were just faced with barrier upon barrier upon barrier, and they were there and ready and had the resources and had the love and the ability to do all of this, but they were just being faced with a 2-year block because it was so difficult for them. And these children needed. There was 160 kids in this home. We were told it was 300, but there was 160 kids in this home that could have been rehomed and had nobody, would have never have anybody. But they had stopped this intercountry stuff with people traveling over and adopting the children due to the Romanian stuff that was happening. There was a mad rush on people trying to adopt Romanian babies years ago. So eventually because this was taking so long, I had this child sitting over there, and we made it. She was ours basically from the get-go. So I put her I hired a foster care worker. I hired a foster mother over there and hired a house and put her in there. And basically we treated her as our own. We used to fly her back and forth on all school summer holidays, and take her back and forth as much as we could. So she was back and forth for around 4 or 5 months a year while all this was going on. So it took around 4 years to do that.
4 years.
Yeah. But during that period, we started to get approached. Things weren't right in the charity over there that I was working with, because I'm an expert at this stuff. I know the finances, I know how things work, and I was arriving over and I was there a lot, and nobody has ever been out there a lot. Like the Irish directors of this place never really went out. They never went out and saw what was going on. There was one operator, there was a CEO over there, an Irish person who was running the show out there, but all Moldovans. And there was all these sort of budget lines. There was all like drivers, and they had these sort of full cost lines for everything you were doing. So I was sponsoring all of this, but I was saying, look, where's this person? They're not there. And he said, they are there. And I said, oh, look, come on now. I said, like, I'm running service like this for years. I said, there's a bit of fat in this here. I says, you're making that cost line up. And I said, just tell me you're making it up, and I don't mind, because I know you have to have an extra bit of fat in this stuff because you need to be able to run your service. No, you're wrong. And I went, and at the time we were starting to get approached by the people that we were hiring, going, you need to leave here. This is bad here. You'll never be allowed to adopt that child. That will never happen. They don't want you to adopt that child. They want you just to be attached to that child, so you'll keep paying.
Fuck.
But they don't want you to have it. And these are the Moldovans telling us this. These are the Moldovans saying, this is bad, you need to leave, you need to get out of here, you need to get away from this. And one of the care homes that I was looking at and I said, like, that person, there's no drivers here. The driver is this person's husband, and he's the person doing it. And this person over here, that's the same thing. The same person is doing this job and this job. So I could calculate there was somebody getting 3 salaries over here, another person getting 3 salaries over here. So I started to push against it a bit, and then I started to get major pushed back and shut down. And it came to a cusp when the house that we were looking to buy was owned by this individual, and it was agreed to be bought. They transferred the deposit over to themselves from the bank account, the whole lot. And I said, look, we need to get board approval from the charity, and to get this, because it's a related party transaction, because you own it, and I've approved that we'll buy it. And we thought it was a bit expensive, but we didn't know. But the charity the board of the charity freaked out and said, no, under no circumstance is this happening. That's not being sold. That's not, you can't take the money for that house. They wouldn't allow them to do it. And things just completely imploded then. It was things completely turned on its head, and I was marched. I was basically getting messages going, oh, well, you need to understand how things work over here, and this is Moldova, this is in Ireland, and you need to play the system over here, and if you won't, things won't work out for you. You won't get things done over here. So,
and when they were saying things won't get done, were they talking about your daughter as well?
Oh yeah, there was basically my child was living in a supported living house at the time, and it was one major thing happened, and I was in a meeting. I was at this child. Remember, I was in the meeting about sort of onward foster care placement, because we were building capacity in the system, the healthcare system over there. So the healthcare system of Moldova, they adopted our system. They adopted all newest training programs, and they still to this day they're using all newest training programs for training for children. But we were basically looking at sort of trying to rehome and move the children into foster care placements, and we were talking about trying to move key children up, and the original child that I had been fond of was sitting on my knee. We were looking at trying to get her an onward foster care placement and it came up that the mother had rocked into the orphanage and said, I want to take my child back.
Just like that.
Yeah, but like I said, but that mother was beaten to death.
Yeah.
And she says, oh, no, I never said that. I said, you fucking did say that. I said, that you told me that child's mother was beaten to death in front of her, and that's why she was in care. No, I never said that. And 3 of the other donors in the similar position to me, wealthy guys, were told the same story about the same child, about the same thing, and were flogged this whole thing about you could adopt this child, but you can never adopt that child because she didn't have status to be adopted. She wasn't adoptable because she had a mother. She was in the system, she was in the foster care system, and they knew this.
But they were playing everyone.
But they were playing this. So basically, I describe, looking back, this whole system, this whole cute kid area with these 13 kids was the marketing department. They had these lovely children who could speak English, who were cute, who used to sit on the laps of like wealthy men to make them feel sorry to death and to invest in the charity. And some of the people that were like, I got away with maybe. I got relatively 200,000. Was spent at that point in time into the charity, but I know there was tens upon tens of millions that went into this charity before me into this charity, and I started.
Who was getting the money?
Well, it was going into the charity. Like, it transpired later what we uncovered over the course of what happened. So things started to deteriorate. This person turned around to me and said, if you don't toe the line over here, things are going to change for you. And basically started to, like, I was hearing that they were planning on closing the house down, and the rent wasn't paid. Now all the rent was paid. I was paying the rent. I was paying for my daughter's care. I was paying everybody and everything. And there's rumblings about that. And I flew over an emergency. I flew over and had a meeting with this person, an Irish person, and a Moldovan doctor in a lobby of a hotel over in Moldova. And I basically said, look, what's going on? I don't want things to fall apart. We wanted to do this transaction. Your board says you weren't allowed to do it. So I can't do anything about that. I said, like, I will buy another house. We'll get another one. You just go find another house. No, transfer all the money over to our account now. And I went, well, no, I'm not transferring 150,000 over to buy a house now, or 120,000. I said, about seeing the house. I said, you show me the house. I said, you need to know how things work in Moldova, and you need to pay, and you need to transfer the money over now.
This is an Irish man.
There's an Irish person who told us, a woman, said, you need to transfer this money over to now, or we're shutting down or things are going to go bad for you over here. We're shutting things down. And we're going, I'm happy to. Of course, I just find a house, just find another house, and I'll buy that house, and we'll put the kids into that house. And they went, no. And I flew away thinking that everything was okay and that it was going to be resolved.
Did you transfer?
No. And I started to hear around. I stopped being able to. Now this is now. I had a daughter. Wait, but she wasn't ours. She wasn't adopted yet.
But in your head,
in ours, she was adopted, and we had full access. She had internet connection. She had living in a house, and we stopped getting phone contact from her from that next morning.
that must have been terrifying.
And we were completely cut off from her, and we had no contact with her for around 3 or 4 days. We started to get phone calls from the people around the Moldovans going, "We don't believe this is happening. This is terrible." She had basically been, my daughter had been collected from school that very day, put in a van and brought back to the orphanage and said, "This is where you live now and your dad's gone."
Fuck off.
Yeah. And he doesn't, they didn't pay the rent and everything's gone. He's not here anymore and it's gone. It's over.
They told her that?
They told her that. So at that time, I started to realize that things had started to go a bit bad, and I'd start to mooch other people in the system. So the department, the Minister for Health and Disabilities was retiring, and she'd only gone out of a job, and I couldn't hire her because it would have been corrupt, because she was a public representative, but she had retired, and she was gone to work for UNICEF. So I hired her the following week, or the week before. I started to talk to her about, I hadn't hired her yet, but I had started to talk to her about trying to work for me, because I said I wasn't getting on with the Irish charity over there. I started to see big problems, all sorts of issues around. I couldn't understand where money was going. I couldn't understand staffing resources, where people were. The Moldovan staff were telling me that people were being pulled in off the fields to come and wear T-shirts and to appear like there was loads of staff, and the Irish were coming. And this was coming from the Moldovans. The Moldovans were telling me this. And there's this one picture of me that was taken with 40, the people that I had funded originally, these 40 carers. And she told me that it was all fake, and there was none of them were on the payroll. They were just brought in for the photo, brought in for the day to work. So I knew things were going awry. So I had this Moldovan woman, and she pulled strings, and because the Moldovans were horrified that this was after happening. They were horrified that they were after cutting, because it was bad. It was a horrible thing to happen to this child. So I managed to get Andrea out on a special visa the following day to Spain or Canaries or somewhere, because she could go under a Schengen thing. Got her out on a holiday and pulled her out, and then basically I remember bawling her eyes out. She met us over there with the foster care worker, and was bawling her eyes out, crying that I thought you'd left me.
That's shocking.
Mm-hmm. So I went ballistic, obviously. I went ballistic about this. I went to the board of the charity, complained. I was initially greeted with absolute horror and go, "Why are you doing this? Why are you saying all this stuff? Why are you saying this about the charity?"
They didn't believe you.
They didn't believe me, and they didn't believe me. And this is why they couldn't understand why. They didn't believe me, but they couldn't understand why she would have done that, why she would close down the house, because we knew they had money. And even I transferred 10,000 euros over to them the next day afterwards to ensure, because they were saying we no money to run this house anymore. It's all gone. All the funds are gone. And that was at the precursor for that, was because they said they had ran out of money. And we said, well, look, we gave you 6 months worth of money up front. It's 3 months into the project. Where's it all gone? Show us your accounts. No, just transfer the money. They wouldn't give us the accounts. And when they were giving us the accounts, they were changing all the time. So different cost lines were changing all the time. And I basically transferred 10 grand over as a buffer to stop the house closing down, but they closed it down anyway. And the deposit had been taken for the house already. There was loads of money in the account to run the operation that was there, but she shut it all down immediately. So I went directly to the charity, the board. I went to them and told them everything that I thought was happening with the cost lines and everything. They didn't believe me. The wife was actually disgusted at me that I would do such a thing, because they thought this person was an angel. They were going fundraisers in the Shelburne all the time. They thought this person was an absolute angel. They were saving kids, and all the language they were using. They go, if you don't put this money in, this child will die. You have to do this. These children are dying. Children are dying. Children are dying. This is all you ever heard, was children are dying. No one fucking dying. It wasn't happening. There was
putting the guilt trip on.
Putting the guilt trip on everybody, because they wanted the money off them because the children were dying.
That's shocking.
Okay? Yeah. So basically I went to the charity and I reported everything that I'd seen. The chairman actually went over and did his own investigation, basically substantiated everything that I had said.
Thank God.
Was going on, but
was he shocked?
Couldn't get the whole board to agree, and basically him and around 2 or 3 other people resigned from the board a new board took over. Basically, what was happening was for years, this is the crux of it, what was happening was that basically the money was being fundraised, around 400,000 or 500,000 euros a year was being fundraised in Ireland in an Irish charity, bought in an Irish charity. It was being transferred over to a Moldovan entity in a person's name. It was being withdrawn in cash and put in a safe and distributed in cash. So basically, when the chairman at the time of the board went over to evaluate what was happening, did a spot check, they found the same person's name on 7 withdrawals. There was the same person signing for the tens upon tens of staff or hundreds of staff that they had weren't there that day when the payday came. There was only 7 or 8 people who were drawing the funds, that he said. So he put forward around 50 things to the board and said that we need to do something about it, and they didn't. They three of the board
still going on?
3 of the board members resigned. The 3 in place, they contracted an independent review. They said with an independent auditor. The independent auditor came and chatted to me briefly. Never went back to the then chairman and asked him about what he had found. Very narrow terms of reference. Basically wrote a rubbish report that I never seen, was never handed to me, never made available, never made public. Sent that off to the charities regulator and basically insinuated that I had some sort of a personal issue with this individual, and that's what the crux of it was, and that was the reason for everything happening. But we found out just the amount of information that we found out over the years that happened, but we couldn't. We just and we weren't the first. It was through 2 other organizations separate. There's somebody around 15 years ago that did the same thing as us, went out and invested, had an absolutely horrific time with this charity, actually went to the DPP about something that had happened out there between one of the founders and one of the service users, and it never came to anything because of the jurisdictional issues. And another person I know went out and did the same problem, had massive amounts of money that was misused, but they just, everything was in cash, and you couldn't prove that any money had gone anywhere.
Yeah.
Because everything was done in cash. So that's
that was an eye opener.
But I got there in the end. We got there in the end. We got her 2 years ago.
What was that like?
It was absolutely, I didn't think it was like, I felt like a kidnapper because I was getting her at the plane. I had to live in Moldova for 6 months while all that was going on.
Did you?
And right at the end, they needed one parent to actually be in the country for 6 months or 3-4 months at the end for the final assessment. They allowed Jade to stay back and mind the other kids. But I had to live in the middle of COVID. I lived in Moldova in a hotel. And basically, it was really funny because she's like a teenager. So you'd be going, it was in her house with her foster care worker that I had set up. It was hilarious because when things went bad with that charity, I had just been getting to know this other charity called P4EC, who actually did provide paperwork, who did provide receipts, who did provide accounts, who did provide everything. And they were the Moldovans. They were supposedly the dodgy ones. And they were squeaky clean about everything, had full audited reports on everything. They were so embarrassed and so pissed that they could have been represented in this way, that they were neglecting their own children and that their children were dying. And
it was making them look bad.
No children dying here. Like, we wouldn't let our children die. Like, it wasn't particularly good care, but they wouldn't let their children die either. They cared for the citizens. They were pissed that this was all going on. And I had been like, you're right. You didn't realize how much you were being managed. Like, you were being brought in at the dead of night to an undisclosed location in the dark.
It's like a movie scene.
Like a movie scene. And there was a movie about this, an adoption one. And you felt threatened all the time. You thought you were at risk of something going to happen. But then when I rocked into started working with P4C, and I got my daughter into this new house with a new foster care worker. She worked with us for around 2 years, Carolina. She was a lovely girl, lovely woman. She gave up her life to basically mind our child for 2 years while the adoption thing was going on, and run like sort of it was like boarding school, really. She was just living in another country. She was on the phone every day, but she was in school. But she gave up her life to that, for 2 years to work for us. But when we were dealing with this new crew, we only realized that Moldova is like a gorgeous country. It's like a real cosmopolitan center to it. Chisinau is a beautiful city. Like, you can go out to top restaurants, and there was like like my daughter loved this sushi restaurant that we used to go to. So we thought this was this bleak, horrible Eastern Bloc country.
But you were only showing what they
wanted to see. And then all of a sudden you were out in this cosmopolitan city, and it was gorgeous. You go for walks in the park and doing cool things, and we were just managed all through that period. And I was terrified. I was still terrified because the individual in question had loads of power, loads of connections, and still over there, loads of connections, loads of power over there. And we were at one point, bizarrely, my entire social work file disappeared from the Moldovan system. Just disappeared. Like it went. We had a full folder on file on the adoption in Moldova, and it just
squirrely now
disappeared from the social work department over there. Now we had copies of everything all the time. We always had copies of stuff, so we were able to replace it. But we had complete independence from the Irish organisation then, and ran our own program, and still to this day are running I'm committed to finishing out what I started and building the services out there. I have a day service that's being built at the moment, and the second home, the third one's coming. And I think this particular individual thought I was going to go away, and the type of person will go away.
You're still there.
And I'll never go away. And I'll never, ever stop until this particular person is found out and shown what they've actually done. No matter what, if they can prove it or not, you know. And even then, there was a newspaper article there a while ago about it, that they did an investigative journalist went over and uncovered that the house in question was never actually owned by the individual in the first place. It was owned by the charity, and it somehow transferred into the ownership of the family at some point in time, and then transferred, and they were looking to buy it back, so it never was owned. And there was all these questions, but that's been buried. Like, somebody's paid for that to disappear into the ether. They've ran a massive PR campaign that the newspaper articles and investigations have been basically dealt with.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Well, here's a wood from the trees promise. Watch your back. Well, look, I'm not asking any more questions after that bombshell, because that's just. Yeah. But I tell you, that's an amazing thing to do, and I love getting people like you on, because I don't think you don't give yourself enough credit, and you probably don't want it. But you're an amazing man. You do so many good things for people, and you're a credit. If there was more people like you in the world, we'd have a way nicer world to live in.
Sure, look, you just keep your head down and do what you have to do every day and keep going, you know. So.
But thanks a million for coming on. I'll have to get you on again. You have too many good stories. I never even got to the good stuff. But thanks a million, Ed.
Cheers.
Sound. Thanks a million.